The Locked On Podcast Network presents The Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports. You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators.
We are no longer talking about how awesome, incredible, and relieving it is that the Florida Gators are national champions once again. Now we are talking about that same Florida Gators team could be seeing a lot of roster turnover this offseason, right? And look, that's not surprising. This Florida Gators team was one of the more senior teams in college basketball. And I feel like in recent years, especially, we've seen those more senior teams are more likely to win a national championship or to just go on a deep run because of their experience, their maturity, their ability to handle adversity and deal with that, right? And the Florida Gators are losing quite a bit, but most notably, most important, the Florida Gators are losing the best player in program history, the only first-team All-American in program history, in Walter Clayton Jr. Walter Clayton Jr. led this team to the absolute promised land, right? Was dynamite from three, was an electric player all around, and was the best guard in the country. I don't care about any who won what award. Walter Clayton Jr. is the best player in the country this year, if you're asking me. And if you're not asking me, I don't know why you're here, right? I will say that. But for the Florida Gators, losing Walter Clayton is huge. Of course, he was incredibly efficient, incredibly effective, and his only, like when we talk about Walter Clayton Jr., he had really two flaws, right? One, that he would turn the ball over. And two, that at times he would be relatively disengaged defensively. And that's more frustrating than just being a bad defender, right? Like if you're a bad defender, but you're trying and you're out there and you're hustling and you're doing all these things, that's different than just someone who isn't trying their hardest. And when tournament time came, Walter Clayton Jr. said, all right, time to tighten up, time to go win a ring. And that's what he did. He tightened up defensively. He got a lot better. Had blocks coming out all of a sudden, way more than usual. Great player. That is going to be gone. He's going to go to the NBA. He's going to get drafted, and he's hopefully going to find a spot where he can last and thrive for a while. I think especially as we can look at Walter Clayton Jr. and say, hey, best player in program history, right? NBA teams will look at him and probably say, backup guard with potential to become a starter if he becomes more consistently engaged on defense. But that's how we can look at Walter Clayton there. Losing Elijah Martin, right? Your other starting guard. Again, I count, I usually, when I talk about Will Richard, I understand guard is how many people will talk about him. I understand that's probably how you should talk about him. But for me, I just think of him as the small forward here, even though he's 6'4", 6'5". But losing Elijah Martin, we'll talk about Will Richard in a second. Losing Elijah Martin, huge. He was a stabilizing presence for this team, especially when tournament time came. He took on more of a leadership role, as did Walter Clayton. But he took on more of a leadership role. And he was hammering home the things that this team needs to do, keeping their head on straight. Elijah Martin, an elite finisher around the rim, had poster dunks, transition dunks that just lit up the crowd, lit up my living room. And he's going to be sorely missed. His experience was invaluable. And I know that people don't think of him as a shooter, but I will say I do think that 35% from three, including some games he's had where he shot like 0 for 4, 1 for 6, whatever it may be, I do think shooting 35% from three, considering that, pretty good. Again, elite finisher around the rim. I think the best overall defender on the team, or as the guards, I think at least. And he's going to be gone, and Florida's going to sorely miss him. Then there's Will Richard, who I think was an analytical coach's dream, right? Which Todd Golden, as we know, one of the most analytically oriented coaches in the country. I think Will Richard was an analytical coach's dream. Will Richard did not shoot a lot, but when he did, they were almost always around the rim twos, catch and shoot threes. He wasn't doing a ton off the dribble, from three at least. Wasn't doing a ton off the dribble, and a lot of his twos came on dunks or in transition or offensive rebounds and putbacks, things like that. And so Will Richard was Todd Golden's, creative player, right? That's it. That's what he was. He had the highest effective field goal percentage on the team from the guards. He was slightly behind Ruben Chinilu for the lead for the entire team. He had the highest true shooting percentage on the team, or tied for it with Thomas Houck. He shot 67% from two, most of which were dunks and layups or shots right around the rim. Shot 36% from three, including some elite clutch shots. Shot 85% from the free throw line. Would get steals pretty consistently and was probably the best on-ball steal getter, I guess we'll call him, on this team. They're all gone. They're all seniors. They're all gone. Then we have to acknowledge the two legitimate possibilities here, right? Not that they are the only two options, but these are two things that can happen. One, and I've said this before, and I will continue to say this, I am expecting both Alex Condon and Thomas Houck to declare for the NBA draft. And I say that because declaring for the NBA draft is different from declaring for the NFL draft, okay? The NFL draft, it is mostly, I am still in college. I submit to the NFL Draft Advisory Board. I get a response on what teams think of me. And then I decide to declare or not declare. Okay? With the NBA, you can declare, go through the pre-draft process, go through the NBA combine, get your results, and then decide to go back to school. We've seen Florida Gators do it recently. We've had multiple Florida Gators do it in recent years. So that's all a possibility. So that's why I say I would expect Alex Condon and Thomas Houck to both declare for the NBA draft, because I think they should. I think they should declare for the draft. First off, get your name in front of NBA scouts, GMs, coaches, whoever's going to be there. Get your name out there. Declare for the draft. Go through the combine process. Go through all that. And then I think that the response they would get would be second round picks, maybe a late first, but second round picks. Keep the door open to return, because again, you could do that in the NBA, or you could do that with the NBA draft. You could declare and come back to your original school, or declare and hit the portal. And I think that generally with the NBA, the way that I look at it is, if you are not a lottery pick, there is no need for you to come out earlier than you need to. Right? And so I do think that we'll see both declare, but I also think we'll see both come back, because I think that both will be looked at as second round picks, especially with Thomas Houck. His sample size is small because he started playing great, especially in the biggest moments, right? Especially in tournament play. But he wasn't America's sixth man for much of the season. He was our sixth man. We loved him. We die for him. But he wasn't this America sweetheart that he's become. And Alex Condon has played, like I've been saying, since the start of the SEC tournament. I think he's played fairly poorly. And so I do think that NBA teams will look at that and say, well, you really folded when it was most important, and so come back. And again, I don't think Alex Condon is a bad player. I said this yesterday. One of the reasons I'm so hard on Alex Condon is because I think he could be truly great. That's one of the reasons I'm so hard on him. I think he could be great. I expect more from him. Okay? I will also say that I would expect at least a player or two to hit the portal. I feel like most people could probably expect that at some point. We'll talk about maybe who that might be.
The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting easy, whether it's picking my favorite teams or diving into player props from three-pointers to steals to assists. There are so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance at even bigger winnings. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Houston officially gets commitment out of Pop Isaacs. Pop Isaacs is from Las Vegas, Nevada, which will be really important in a second. Pop Isaacs is most recently from Creighton. He went to Texas Tech. He started at both places, was all Big 12 freshman team at Texas Tech, yada, yada, yada. At Creighton, he played just 8 games before having a hip injury, but in those 8 games, he averaged 16.3 points, 4.8 rebounds, and 3.9 assists, right? So a true game changer for them before injury. And really, I think a lot of people at just the Pop Isaacs level of this are wondering how he fits because he's an electric scorer. He's had his stuff, right? And I think people are wondering how he fits into Houston on the floor more from the defensive side of things, right? He's not known as a lockdown defender. He's not known as the guy that throws his body into things, et cetera. And he's not known for those kinds of moments yet. I think that's kind of the intentional play here if you're looking at what Pop Isaacs is doing. Full disclosure, I had heard some rumblings about this in the last 10 days. And then I heard one guy say, like, I think he's really just using it to kind of up his NIL budget or money or whatever at Ole Miss. And then I heard one guy say, no, that other guy's completely wrong. He'd rather go to Houston. He wants to play for Beard or Sampson or whatever because he wants to improve his image. He understands what his image is out there, and he wants to show people what he can do, yada, yada, yada. That's been the conversation around this for like 10 days. And honestly, it sounded like if it was going to happen this week. I did not think it would happen 24 hours after the national title game tipped off, really. Not even a full 24 hours after the season was over. And so that's a pretty significant bombshell of news, right? And Pop Isaacs is a true electric microwave level scorer where he can just get hot in an instant, right? That is dynamic, game changing, and frankly, with LJ Cryer moving on to basketball somewhere, I don't know if he'll get G League, NBA, Europe, some combination of all that in his career in the coming years. But with him leaving Houston, Pop Isaacs coming into Houston feels like that kind of tit for tat, pulling one in right there, right? And I think that that's interesting because what's alarming to me, like when I commented about this on Instagram, Twitter, etc., the commentary surrounding Pop's commitment to Houston is ultimately feels a lot like when Cryer committed to Houston, right? Cryer came to Houston, everyone's saying that guy is a selfish shooter that can't do anything besides shoot the ball, right? And while he did shoot the ball really well at Houston, obviously, honestly, he did a lot more once he got there. He grew into the kind of defender Houston wanted. He was a true leader this year as a senior. He did dirty work. He guarded big guys. In the national championship game, he's battling and boxing and fighting with bigs, tagging rollers and stuff like that on the inside. Pop Isaacs sees that. They're both about 6'2". If anything, Pop Isaacs a little bit heavier build. And he thinks I can go show that I can do that as well, right? Offensively, they both had a fairly similar resume coming into Houston. The other thing I think is interesting for Pop Isaacs coming to Houston versus Ole Miss, and this is no shot at the Ole Miss program, but people still think of Chris Beard and the stuff that went down with him at Texas like some off the court kind of issues, right? Honestly, Pop Isaacs going to come into Houston, and in rebuilding his image, people know Sampson's not going to put up with that. Sampson and Company have built a program where they can pick and choose what problems they want, and they have been explicit about not wanting those kinds of problems. If Pop Isaacs is going to play at Houston, those kind of problems aren't going to persist, right? And so off the court stuff, I feel like he's also kind of using Houston as a place to rebuild his image. Now, I say using Houston, but Houston's not going to get used here, right? Houston is going to play the guys that fit, and Pop Isaac is going to have to fit in or not play. That's the way it goes here. We've seen Houston not play really talented guys because they didn't quite fit, right? Now, I still have to say that I'm excited about this. I think it's interesting. I think it's intriguing. I think a lot of people are jumping to questions about what this means for the rest of the roster. And it is 2025, folks. People turn over rosters all the time. You can't get your feelings too hurt if someone were to up and leave. However, I don't think this means anything definitive is happening yet. Will there be movement? Almost definitely. It's modern college basketball. But does this mean like Milos Uzan is leaving at point guard? No. I think it could actually mean the opposite. Do I think Milos will go through the NBA draft process? Absolutely. He's going to go get evaluated, get his notes, and I imagine he comes back. Sampson's been adamant that he loves when people do that because they get notes on their game and how to improve, right? That's a good thing. Generally, that's a good thing. He also, Sampson has said things about like, it's worth their while, and he's never going to tell a kid to not go take a bunch of money to go play basketball, right? I don't think Milos is going to hear stuff about going into first round. Right now, he might. We'll see. But if he hears second round stuff, he probably comes back to Houston. Milos and Pop Isaacs are friends. They are both from Las Vegas. They initially went to Prolific Prep together before Pop Isaac decided to go to Wasatch Academy instead. If my sleuthing here and texting and DMing people serves me right anyway. They both started off going to Prolific Prep, both from Vegas. They both finished up playing back in their hometown of Las Vegas for their senior year of high school. There were rumors last offseason on different message boards that these two might have been a package deal in the offseason last year in the transfer portal before ultimately not being one. I think Pop Isaacs coming to Houston actually might increase the likelihood of Milos Uzan coming back to Houston. And I think that that's important to note here. It's not quite Paul George and Kawhi Leonard being a package deal for the Clippers or anything like that, that kind of a connection. But I do think that there could be some encouragement to bring Milos back if his buddy's coming. Now, I will say that he offers a different skill set than like Isaiah Harwell, than Emmanuel Sharp, than Kingston Fleming. The backcourt is getting crowded. But what I don't think, I'm trying to think how to say this, I don't think that impacts the guys that get a lot of minutes right now. I think you're more likely to see a more evenly dispersed set of minutes amongst those guys where it's more like 27, 27, 25, 25 kind of minutes as opposed to 35 kind of minutes amongst some of those guys. And you're more likely to see guys further down the roster be like, I don't know where I fit in here. Maybe Coach Q takes a couple to Louisiana as well. We'll see where those kinds of things pan out. But I would not worry about the guys at the top of the roster, at the top of the minute chart, I should say. Getting worried about this one. Everyone who signs up for Houston, 5-star freshman included, transfer portal guy included, returner included, everyone who signs up for Houston knows what they signed up for. Sampson doesn't, beat around the bush about it. The program is long established. The success of the program is established. The success of the culture is established. They're not going to show up and say, well, actually, I thought I was going. No, there's been no fibbing, no lying. Guys coming into the program know what they're getting into. And I think, like I said with Jarris Walker back when he committed as a 5-star, like I said with Marcus Sasser when he said he was coming back, like I said with Jamal Shell when he said he was coming back, guys come back knowing what they're getting into. And I think it tells us a lot about the kind of guy they are when they sign up for this. This ain't easy. The way Houston does things is never going to be easy. Being a Houston Cougar is not going to ever be easy, right? And when you sign up to come be one, you know what you're getting into. And I think that tells us a lot about the growth of Pop Isaacs, right? Whatever you thought of him when he was at Tech, whatever you thought of him when he committed to Creighton, whatever you thought about him wherever, right? This tells you something different than most of the national narrative about the kid, right? He's going to have to score. There's some like threshold of ability that you have to be in the program. Yes. But also, he clearly wants to go somewhere to work on his defense. to work on his image, to work on the way he fits into a program, right? And ultimately to win, right? And I think that you're going to see a lot of that come out. Now, does that mean it's a guarantee? No. It's going to be awkward at first. It's going to be like fitting in Miles Suzanne last year at the start of the year. You're going to take some lumps in November trying to figure all the pieces out. But as Coach Sampson always says, the goal is not to be good in November. The goal is to be good in March. The goal is to be good in April. The goal is to be good cutting down nets on that Monday in April. And Houston was so close just 48 hours ago. And the goal is to be past that mark this time next year, right? And so that's why this move makes a lot of sense to me.
The New Orleans Saints' newest NFL draft quarterback connection is sure to be a polarizing one. And we're going to kick everything off with the newest quarterback connection, Jalen Milroe out of Alabama, perhaps one of the more polarizing quarterbacks that the New Orleans Saints have been connected to, but would show off and flex a muscle that the New Orleans Saints have not been able to prove in the last decade and a half. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. The New Orleans Saints now connected to yet another quarterback, and probably the one quarterback that we hadn't really seen a lot of connective tissue with when it came to the New Orleans Saints outside of the Senior Bowl, and that is Alabama Crimson Tide passer, athletic, dynamic athlete, Jalen Milroe. And this is a polarizing one, much like Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado has been, because there are a lot of people that don't like the way that Jalen Milroe plays the quarterback position and have a lot of criticisms around him because they see him more as a dynamic runner than as a dynamic passer. And while I do think that there are truths in that, I do think that there is something that Jalen Milroe presents that the New Orleans Saints could potentially benefit from, and that is development potential. We've seen this in the NFL before. Players get knocked because they're quote-unquote running backs as opposed to quarterbacks and everything. And I'm not going to dive into all of the reasons around all of these different things, but what I will take time today is discussing the football of it all, which is that, listen, Jalen Milroe is a running quarterback. That's absolutely what it is that he does incredibly well. He's a dynamic athlete with the ball in his hands. But a lot of people want to know, can he get the ball out of his hands? And honestly, he's got a pretty nice deep ball. In fact, the big thing is that the short intermediate areas, you got to be able to throw the football in those areas, and you got to be able to do it accurately. You got to be able to do it with precision. 5 yards down the field, 15 yards down the field. You've got to be able to win in those areas, particularly in the middle of the field between the numbers. But obviously, if you can get the ball downfield outside the numbers, guys like Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, as well as Brandon Cooks give you the opportunity to be able to maximize that. But here's what this could mean for the New Orleans Saints. Let's say that Shedeur Sanders does as I expect and goes off the board before the New Orleans Saints draft at number 9. If he's there at number 9, you take him. I've been very consistent on that. He's great to me as a quarterback. I think he can be a franchise guy in the NFL. If he's there at 9, you take him. I just doubt he's going to be there at 9. So unless you're going to move up, I don't think that the Saints are going to get a hold of. So then the next question becomes, okay, then Cam Ward's off the board. Shedeur Sanders is off the board. You'd grab a playmaker, somebody that can help your offense, somebody that can help your defense, build your defensive line, your offensive line at number 9, whatever it is that you want there. And then you roll back around to either pick 40 or potentially look to move up from 40 for a guy like Jackson Dart or for a guy like Jalen Milroe. And if you make that selection, basically what you're trying to do is develop a quarterback. And that's where I think Jalen Milroe is a really intriguing prospect, because Kellen Moore has at the top of his offense 3 former NFL quarterbacks. Himself as a former NFL quarterback, as well as the winningest quarterback in college football history. You also have Doug Nussmeier as the offensive coordinator, former New Orleans Saints coach, as well as Scott Tolzien, former NFL coach as well, who is now the New Orleans Saints quarterback coach. This offensive staff at the top in terms of the positions, the coaching staff positions that are going to best impact a quarterback or most immediately impact a quarterback are all former quarterbacks themselves. And therefore, they're built to develop a quarterback. That's why you do that. That's the hope with a situation like this. And so could the New Orleans Saints get something out of Jalen Milroe like the Philadelphia Eagles got out of Jalen Hurts, who faced similar criticism? could the New Orleans Saints get something out of Jalen Milroe in the fashion, maybe not MVP level play, but in the same fashion that the Baltimore Ravens got out of Lamar Jackson, who faced similar criticisms coming into the NFL, and honestly still faces some of those criticisms in the NFL, quite unfairly, I might add. And so a lot of people would shrug, cringe, or brush off the idea of a Jalen Milroe being successful in the NFL. But if you like the tools, if you like what he's able to do as a runner and feel that you can help him grow and develop as a passer, then you're taking that upon yourself as an organization to say, we can make something with this. We can mold something here. Now, here's the thing. In order for the Saints to be able to do that, they're probably going to have to move up in the second round or move back into the bottom of the first round. There's just a lot of those spots that might not take a quarterback in the first 8 selections where you could still see a quarterback going in the second round, right? Teams like the New York Jets, a team like the Las Vegas Raiders, they might not take a quarterback in the first round, even if Shedeur Sanders does fall. And then therefore, if the New Orleans Saints are still looking for a quarterback at pick 40, they might not be able to sit around and wait for those teams to take a second pass and potentially scoop up a Jalen Milroe, a Jackson Dart, all that. So they'd probably have to mobilize in order to go and get that passer. But you're only doing that in the hopes of developing said passer. The other piece of this too is the Kellen Moore side of it. Actually, Kellen Moore, being a new head coach and a first-time head coach, is kind of perfectly equipped to be the coach for a guy like Jalen Milroe. It's a comfortable scenario for Jalen Milroe to end up in. He would be somebody that would be able to come in and join a new head coach that's got patience, that the organization is going to have patience with, that has time, and that's not going to be moved on from after just 1 year. And so there's a lot of development potential for Jalen Milroe behind or working with a head coach like Kellen Moore, who's in the situation that he's in, which is a very comfortable situation as a first-time head coach with an organization that has proven to be patient, sometimes to a fault, but has certainly proven to be patient. Jalen Milroe completed 64.3% of his passes last season for just 2,844 yards, 16 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, so that interception to touchdown rate, not ideal. And then, of course, as a runner, he was absolutely incredible. Ran 168 times for 762 rushing yards and 20 rushing touchdowns. The interesting thing there, though, is that the college statistics, the way that it's done, is that sacks are considered rushes and negative rushing yards as well. So he probably had, in terms of what it was that he did beyond that, even more in terms of scramble yards and all those other things. I'll have those numbers for a later episode this week. But it's a comfortable scenario also landing behind Derek Carr, who would have 2025 more than likely as the starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. And then even if Derek Carr ends up injured and things like that, you don't have to be thrust into the situation as a starter. You could turn to a Spencer Rattler to step in again, just like you did last year. It's a comfortable scenario for Jalen Milroe to potentially develop. The pitfall is, what if he doesn't? Not a huge disappointment, right? You're rolling your dice on, I mean, at the worst scenario here, you get a phenomenal athlete that you try to find another way to utilize on the field. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think if you have the chance to develop him as a quarterback, you want the ball in his hands. You want the ball in the hands of that athlete every play. And so that's something that you could potentially look at. So it would be a polarizing situation. This is going to get a lot of hate because I didn't say anything bad about Jalen Milroe, and people love to say bad things about quarterbacks, but that's not really my game. When it comes to scouting, I want to know what a player can do. And there's a lot of tools for Jalen Milroe, and certainly would present a very interesting development piece for the New Orleans Saints in potentially developing a quarterback, which is something that they showed in each of their previous regimes they did not have the ability to do. Could Kellen Moore finally bring quarterback development to the Big Easy? And could it start with Jalen Milroe? We'll find out later on this month. Could start with Shedeur Sanders as well. Could start with Jackson Dart as well. We'll see where things go.
Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
In the aftermath of the firing of Michael Malone and Calvin Booth, there's still a lot of questions.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast.
Ryan, in his article, the Michael Malone-Calvin Booth feud probably cost the Nuggets a championship. In there, you wrote, I'm looking for this, Booth was also responsible for the handling of the Jamal Murray extension talks. Before Murray signed his extension, Booth explored the idea of trading Murray rather than signing him to a max. According to league sources, Josh Kroenke ultimately put a stop to that idea and gave Booth the go-ahead to offer a full max contract to the Nuggets guard instead. Okay. So what I think is interesting about this is the timing. Is Shams tweets that the Nuggets and Jamal Murray are going to reach an extension. And then nothing. And we talked about how weird that was. I will say now, I heard about these talks that Ryan is alluding to. I heard from other teams that other teams were asking me, are they shopping Murray? Like, are they really not going to re-sign him? And I was like, my understanding is that they're going to re-sign him, but I would imagine they're doing due diligence. I do think this is important to note that I want to ask you this. What do you think? Every time a player is eligible for extension, every single time, executives gauge that player's value on the market. Because it's before you lock them into this big money contract that's harder to move, what can I get for him now? You set a baseline so that later you can come back and be like, wait. 2 years ago, you were willing to offer me this for him. Yeah. And now you get more guaranteed money on the deal, so you don't have to worry about free agency, those kind of things. Do you think it was that, or do you think there was genuine interest from Calvin Booth in moving him?
I think there was genuine interest. I think that Calvin has always been a little bit iffy, so on Jamal Murray in general. I think that based off of his conversations with a variety of people, you could get that notion. But more than that, it was the way that the season had gone. Denver had offered Jamal Murray an extension, like a big extension that Jamal Murray decided to turn down after the championship. He decided to bet on himself and try to go get even more money. Newsflash, he got even more money. He ultimately flamed out in the playoffs in a pretty ugly way. He threw a heating pack. He had very poor efficiency. There were moments where he shined, but there are also moments where he faltered. And then throughout the conversations that the Nuggets had in the offseason, the Olympics were also running parallel to that. And he was bad, like horrible bad in the Olympics. And part of that was probably due to injury. There was a reported aspect of it. But it also didn't help that he was playing very poorly during all of these talks when Calvin Booth was trying to appraise whether to hand out just a free max contract extension. And I had reported on fitness and conditioning clauses and things of that nature that were bandied about as well. I think that the Nuggets were doing everything that they could to protect themselves. And one of the ways that you could protect yourself is to come up with a trade option to get a better player or a better fit for yourself. And Calvin Booth was trying to do that. And they ultimately couldn't do that because Murray's value around the league was not very high. And they found that his value around the league was not very high when Calvin Booth brought back a couple of trade ideas, and they were pretty poor. And they were pretty poor trade ideas. And rather than go through with that, it is from league sources that been told that Murray was then signed to a max extension because, not just because, but because Josh Kroenke put the kibosh on any possible trade option at those points. When he saw those trade proposals, those trade ideas lined up, he said, no, we're just going to commit to the guy that we won a championship with. And I don't know if he was wrong for that. I don't know if he was right for that, but that is, I think, what happened.
Now, let's talk Jalen Pickett and Zeke Naji. So this is the cycle that the Nuggets got caught into. And as I talked about in my post about how toxic and bad things got, because it was like literally people in the front office felt like they couldn't talk to anybody, because it's like, if you speak to Malone, then, and you're supposed to be a Calvin guy, it's like, what are you telling him? That's the nonsense that it got to.
Yeah.
There was like paranoia in the front office.
Cold War.
And like Calvin over the course of the last year, Calvin Booth over the course of the last year has isolated himself to a very small group of people. And cut out a lot of people that have been with the organization a long time. And that was not good either. So he drafts Pickett and he gives him a guaranteed deal. This is going to be like the backup point guard. He believes in this guy. And Pickett's now there's two patterns here. Pickett's not ready. And so we're in a cycle where Calvin says, you got to play him so that he's ready. And Malone goes, he's not ready because he's not good right now. So he can't play because we're trying to win. So he doesn't play. So he's not good. So Calvin wants him to play, but he can't because Malone doesn't think he's good enough yet. And he hasn't done the stuff. And it's this cycle.
It was insane.
And look, I think Adam and I did this show forever. Adam and I are like, we've talked today. Like Adam believes that more development time should have been given to guys like Zeke Naji and Jalen Pickett. That maybe they could have been great. Maybe they could have been the guys. How do you know if this 2 timelines plan works or not if you don't give them time? And Adam alluded to this today on the DMVR show, which is the idea that Malone, and like, I will not deny that this is the case. Did these guys face an uphill battle because they were Booth's guys? Yes. Yes. Does that mean that Malone did not give them any chance and nothing they could have done? No. If they had played amazing, if they had done everything that he had asked for, if they had, and Jalen's played, because Jalen's shown that he's like a low mistake player that helps them win. He dug himself out of his summer league performance was an atrocity.
It was horrible.
That would have buried anybody on a team with this kind of expectations for wins. But because the roster was so shorthanded, Jalen did get an opportunity, and Malone has given him more and more time and opportunities, including there was reports that he was upset, Booth was upset that he didn't close games. You saw what happened in the Pacers game.
Yeah. Like, okay, Booth, it's insane, and they're both wrong for it. Like, they jacked around Jalen Pickett. They jacked around Zeke Naji. They're using them as pawns. Players shouldn't be pawns in this case. The long and short of it is that these guys were being put in between this Cold War that's going on within this organization. And it's just unfortunate because I don't know if Jalen could have contributed or like could have actually helped. Maybe he could have been more helpful this year had he been playing last year. You remember how many games Reggie Jackson played for the team last year, Matt? It was 82 games. It was 82. And that seems like a lot. And it was actually like Reggie Jackson gassing out, tiring out in the second half of the season because he's an older veteran. And because they asked too much of him. And Malone asked too much of him. So I'm not going to sit here and defend Malone on that because that was ludicrous for him to never give Reggie Jackson a day off, or never force it. It's an unfortunate place for Denver to be where your third string point guard, in this case, fourth string point guard, because they decided Colin Gillespie was better at the time. By the way, Colin is starting games in Phoenix or has been starting games in Phoenix lately. It's just a horrible thing. But the other thing is that Zeke Naji is not the guy to go to war for either.
Yeah. He's just not. Yeah, this is the thing is and it's well, he had that stretch when he's playing power forward. It's you were going to tailor your lineups around Zeke Naji. And that's my whole issue with the entire Calvin Booth line of thinking here. If you thought that Zeke Naji was a power forward, then maybe you should have gotten a backup center to play next to him. It was only ever DeAndre Jordan. And they tried to go get Dario Saric this year, but Dario Saric is an undersized center himself who's pretty unathletic, and you probably would have moved Zeke Naji over to center anyway. Aaron says both parties took Jokic for granted. I'll tell you that's not true.
No,
That's not true. Everybody, if anything, I think Malone knew he was failing Jokic. He just couldn't figure out how, like, both of them couldn't. If you're trying to protect Jokic, if you're from Malone's perspective, you're like, that's why I have to play veterans so that we can win games, because young guys lose games. And Booth looks at it and says the only way to protect Jokic is to build up talent around him, which is why Zeke and Jalen and I guess Hunter Tyson have to play. And it's like, that's that, you know, and that dispute, I think, is where this gets to. My wife actually tweeted something today and I want to share it.
Okay.
Because she's livid, and I do think that her opinion matches a lot of what Nuggets fans think. Like, Adam ran a poll for who was to blame, and like both got like 33%, but Booth got the vast majority of it. She was talking about this about Calvin. She says, like, you lost the power battle and got the coach fired, and we have a roster with real problems, many of which were self-inflicted. And like, that's the reality, is like, Booth went to absolute war by signing these guys to guaranteed contracts and not having any other options. He didn't give him veterans to play. He said, you have to play these guys. And Malone was like, what if I just play the starters 4 to 5 minutes a night?
And that was his fault as well. But like, it was a faulty plan by Calvin to begin with, to go into each of these seasons with so much inexperience and so much like you're really asking Michael Malone to pull a rabbit out of the hat at that point and get these guys on the same page when they're just not ready. Like, Denver had 6 rookie scale guys on contract this year, under roster this year. One of them was Deron Holmes, who unfortunately, like, again, tore his Achilles. I'm gonna keep saying it because it's very unfortunate, and some of these issues may have not been solved. But like,
this is the thing, is like, there's a million ways that this doesn't happen. They win the Wolves game, I think Malone's still the coach.
Yeah.
I don't think Calvin stays, but I think Malone's still the coach. They win the Wolves game. I think they win the Warriors game, and Malone's still the coach. I think if Deron Holmes doesn't tear his ACL, Malone's still the coach. I think if the Wizards games, if they had just been more serious in those games, Malone's still the coach. Like, the gap here is extremely small, which I think is one of the reasons why they decided to pull the trigger now, is because they're like, we're not, like what I've been saying, where I'm like, the Nuggets aren't awful. They're not a joke. They're not the Kings. You should hear some of the things being said around the future of the Kings. I am terrified for those fans. What's being reported or being thought of in league circles. It's terrifying. They're not that. They're close, but they got so far off. And I will say this about the Jokic point of like, they both took him for granted. No, they didn't. Both of them were so dedicated to trying to get Jokic another title, but they were so confident in the way that they were right and the other one was wrong, because the other one kept threatening them. And that's why they're both gone.
The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting easy, whether it's picking my favorite teams or diving into player props, from three-pointers to steals to assists. There are so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance at even bigger winnings. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today.
The Oklahoma City Thunder get revenge over the Los Angeles Lakers.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're diving into the Oklahoma City Thunder getting a big win over the Los Angeles Lakers, as each team, surprisingly, was at full strength tonight, as the Lakers initially listed over half their rotation as questionable, and you thought maybe there was a pathway for them to just kind of take their win on Sunday and hit the road for Dallas in an emotionally charged game tonight against the Mavericks. But instead, we got the rematch. Different results, with OKC getting a lopsided win in this one, which stemmed from Luka Doncic's ejection, SGA's big game, and some lessons learned from these last two meetings. Look, sadly, this podcast has to begin with Luka Doncic being ejected. And it's just the main story from what was a great game. And that's the sad part for this league. This league that has had a lot of bad press this season and has had a lot of talking points. This should have been one of those banner games that you can hang up as, this is why you watch. This is why you invest. This is why you follow this league, because these two teams played an amazing basketball game that saw 20 lead changes. Would have seen more, I think, if you would have had Luka Doncic on the floor. 10 ties, a back and forth affair, stars galore, SGA, Luka, LeBron, Austin Reeves, Jalen Williams, like two young emerging, all-star guys. Jalen Williams made the all-star team this year. Austin Reeves has an all-star appearance or two in his future for sure. These are two teams who I think right now are the two best teams in the West, regardless of record. They're the two best teams in the Western Conference. And it was playing out that way. It was playing out exactly like that. And then they went and tossed Luka. And this is a rare situation where, everybody wants to have the take. Everybody wants to have the opinion of this is whose fault it is. They want to point the finger. To me, it's all parties involved. In a perfect society, would people in the stands kind of heckle athletes? No. In a perfect society, they wouldn't. You'd chant defense. You'd do your team-specific chants, like for Oklahoma City, it's OKC. You do that kind of stuff, but you wouldn't heckle the opponent. The sad reality is, much like in other aspects of life, we don't live in that utopic society. So as far as that goes, from the understanding that we have from the media perspective of talking to the courtside fan, what the fan said was that the shot was short on that shot that Luka hit over Isaiah Hartenstein. Of course, Luka made it, so it wasn't short. It was a beautiful shot. Luka got the switch onto Hartenstein. Hartenstein played amazing defense, bodying into Luka. Luka walks him into the paint. Hartenstein contests the shot very well, and the shot just went in. Great offense beat good defense. That should have been it. But Luka turns to the fan and says some of the 7 words you can't say on television and gets ejected. And here's why he got ejected. Because again, you have to remember the context of what's happened at that point. So leading up to that, Luka already had 1 technical foul. The Lakers are harping on the officials for 48 minutes. And I'm not saying that as a criticism. It just is a matter of fact for this story. Because I do believe that you should work the refs. You can complain about, they're crying. No, it's gamesmanship. It's trying to create a competitive advantage. And the Lakers did that at every single stoppage. So that you have to know that there's history now between this crew tonight and the Lakers, and specifically Luka, who's already gotten 1 technical foul. And he turns and he talks to the fan. But who's in between him and the fan? JT Orr, the official who teed up Luka, who earlier in the game gave the Thunder's Jalen Williams a warning that we found out post-game that J-Dub got a warning. So JT Orr was clearly administering a very strict policy of warnings, of texts. Luka had already gotten one. Jared Vanderbilt got one in short succession. Luka got thrown out. It's clearly something that is on JT Thor's mind. And then you couple that with the knowledge of what Mark said. After the game, Mark Daigneault talked about how that's JT's MO. JT Orr's MO is to tee you up. Because Mark got teed up in Sacramento over what Mark said was a very mild comment. But Mark praised JT Orr for, if that's your line, if that's your line of demarcation, at least he stuck to his guns. So you have to know all that backstory to understand the Luka ejection. Because again, JT Orr was in the wrong. It was a wrong place, wrong time situation. Luka Doncic, I fully believe, was talking to the fan. You can see him talking to the fan. You can see the fan talking to Luka Doncic. This should not have warranted an ejection. This technical foul has to be rescinded. The league has to rescind this technical foul. Because he was just talking to a fan. But with JT Orr standing in between Luka and the fan, just by happenstance, just by the way the game was flowing, coming back from a made shot, JT Orr thought Luka was talking to him. Because he's been talking to JT Orr all night. He's been talking to the officials all night. And it boiled over, and he got ran. So it's on the fan. The fan shouldn't say anything. I don't believe fans should heckle, even if it's innocent stuff like your shot short. The official should have been, I think, more lenient with what Luka said. If JT wasn't talking, so for Luka to say, shut up, whatever else follows, clearly wasn't talking to JT. But from JT's perspective, you've been talking to me all night. It looks like you're looking at me, but you're really looking at the fan. And you just hit that shot over Hartenstein where there was contact. Because again, it was good defense, but better offense. All those factors are at play. And that's where you get to Luka prospect of it all. And I know that Luka has a very massive fan base and a very sensitive one, frankly. I love Luka Doncic. He is my favorite player to watch in the NBA. I've already told you, I think that the crying stuff is gamesmanship. I don't get as bothered by it as many of you do. I love watching Luka. He's a magician. He's one of the best players in this sport. He's a no doubt to me top 3 player in this sport. And you can complain about whoever you think's in the top 3. He's no doubt a top 3 player in the sport. But you have to have better competitive maturity than what you showed tonight in a 1-point game. You just put your team up by 1 point. You already have a technical foul. All the fans said was that the shot was short. Is it worth giving that fan your attention for saying that the shot was short and running this risk, which with one technical foul, where you don't have that safety net, that means you've already been warned, you've already been given 1 tech, and the next one is a goner. You don't have any safety net anymore. Is it worth it? And to me, it's not, because this game felt like a playoff game. The crowd felt like a playoff game. The teams felt treated like a playoff game. Mark brought Shea in at the 10-minute mark of the fourth quarter. That's such an anomaly for a 1 of 82 philosophy that Mark always preaches, which is why I asked him about it post-game. We'll get to that later on. Everything about this should have been a fun playoff ending. And Luka, while I think he's the third to blame, I don't think he's at the top of the list. Luka should have just let it go and been excited about hitting the shot, gotten back on defense, and that's it. Now, if the fan would have said something harsher than your shot short, I would have totally understood. But come on. You've been playing professional basketball since you were 16 years old. Basically, since you were an infant, you've been dominating professional basketball. You've heard way worse stuff than short whenever you let go of a shot. Way worse. And the particular fan that he was interacting with is at every single game, is the rowdiest fan in the building, is someone who antagonizes players. That's why he's up further on the list than Luka in the hierarchy of who's responsible. But you can't let him do that to you, especially over such a very mild-manner comment. And it ruined what was what would have been a fantastic finish, because the Tech puts the Thunder at the free throw line. They tie the game. Then the Thunder go on their avalanche-like run and gain separation from the Lakers, and the game's over and the Thunder win. Separation that we're not sure if they would or wouldn't have gained. We'll never know if they would or wouldn't have gained that separation had Luka been available, because Luka was killing them all night, just like he was killing them on Sunday, because he's a fantastic player. He's a matchup nightmare. James Harden wrongfully called himself the system. Luka is the system. Luka is what makes teams competitive. Luka is how you win basketball games. And it's been that way since the word go. He brought Dwight Powell to the Western Conference Finals. Dwight Powell was a starting center for a Western Conference Finals team because Luka's that good. And you're too valuable to let yourself get lost in a fan saying that your shot that you made was short. And it's a shame that that's had to take up the start of every show today about this game, which was a brilliant game. Luka played a brilliant game up until that point. Shea played a brilliant game. The Thunder played a brilliant game. The Lakers played a brilliant game. This should have been a teaser for what looks like a collision course in the Western Conference playoffs, what looks like the two best teams in the West. And instead it's sidetracked by people thinking that the refs changed this game with that decision. And that's a shame.
Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
Kristaps Porzingis hit some ridiculous shots. Jason Tatum was dominant and might be one of the most clutch players in the league. The season sweep, the Boston Celtics beat the Knicks for the 4th time this year, and the Knicks still unable to beat any good teams. This one really had to suck for them because the Celtics didn't have Al Horford. Jaylen Brown stunk. Derek White couldn't hit a thing. The Celtics did not play well. They got out-rebounded 52-38. They gave up a ton. The Celtics gave up 17 offensive rebounds. That is insane that they gave up that many offensive rebounds. They gave up 22 points off of 15 turnovers. They didn't play great in this game, especially in the first half. And yet, there they were, beating the Knicks in overtime. Tatum hitting the shot to tie the game with 2 seconds left. And the Knicks had everybody. The Knicks were basically fully healthy. They're still working Brunson back in, and they're still working Mitchell Robinson back in. So they're not at their total best, but they wanted to win this game. This has to be a psychological kind of, just in the vein of Joe Mazzulla, who loves psychological advantages. I'm trying to find the right words to properly convey what this is for the Knicks without swearing, because I feel like a curse word here might be the best descriptor for how the Knicks feel, but just fill in your own blanks. The Knicks were trying to win this game. The Knicks want some confidence going into a playoff series, potentially with the Celtics. And to not get this win in this scenario is that's a tough one. And if the Celtics, I'll put it this way, if the Celtics continue this and somehow manage to, if they do meet the Knicks, somehow manage to sweep the Knicks in the second round of the playoffs, does Tom Thibodeau survive that? You think about, Taylor Jenkins already fired him in Memphis. Mike Malone got let go in Denver 3 games before the regular season ended. Wild decision there. Would letting Tom Thibodeau go, having all of this, put this Knicks team together, make all these moves, give up all these picks, and to have them not beat a single good team, and to go out weekly against the Celtics in the playoffs, pressure's on. The pressure is on them to have a good showing in the playoffs. Celtics, I'm sure are putting that pressure on them, putting a lot of pressure on everybody, because they are now the best road team in Celtics history and 1 win away against Orlando from being the best, tied with the Golden State Warriors for being the best road team in NBA history. Either way, they are one of 3 teams to win 33 games in a row. The only on the road. The only other teams to do this, and this is a Sean Grandy stat, a special. I mention him because I love the way he puts this. 270 win teams are the only other ones to win 33 games on the road. And when you put it like that, you go, man, the only other 2 teams to do this won 70 games. The Celtics are sitting here 1 win away from 60 with 3 games left. What's the big difference here? Oh, yeah, all of those disappointing home losses in December and January especially. Last season, the Celtics won 37 games at home. And now here they are with 33 wins on the road. You put those 2 numbers together, and that's 70 wins. But this year's Celtics team had just happened to be 26-13 on the road. Flip those and it makes sense. Flip that and it makes sense. 33-7 on the road, 26-13 at home. Last year, it was 37-4 at home and 27-14 on the road. So they've almost literally flipped the home and road records from last season. That doesn't make sense when you look at it. Just if you're just clicking through and you go, what the hell happened to the Celtics? We know earlier this year, they weren't always trying. They weren't always at their best. They were trying to work back Porzingis, blah, blah, blah. None of that really matters. And I'm not saying they should have been a 70-win team, but man, you look at this road record and you go 33-7, potentially 34-7. That would have been the potential to do something special. Whatever. Doesn't matter. That type of thing is something for us. It's not something for the team. They're just cruising along. They're doing just fine. Not a big deal. They're officially the second seed because Cleveland won. We know that the Celtics are now officially second. There's nothing you can do. The Knicks, not officially third yet. They are 50-29. The Indiana Pacers are 48-31. So they can still tie. So that's not done deal yet, as far as I know. So Pacers can still climb to third. The Knicks still need to win another game, which they probably will, but they still need to do it. The Pacers have won 5 in a row. They are tied with Milwaukee, who have won 5 in a row as the hottest team in the East. So that 4-5 series is going to be interesting, Indiana, Milwaukee. But Celtics looking good, feeling good. Not really much to continue there. This is the last of their kind of like competitive games. I don't know who's going to play against Orlando. I would expect Jalen, Jason, Porzingis all to be out. Al Horford was out against New York. By the way, shout out Al Horford and Florida Gators for that the national championship. Congrats to those guys. But Al might be back against Orlando. Maybe Derek White will play. Holiday's probably going to be out. And so it's up to the main Red Claws, the main Celtics to try to get this 34th road win.